Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Stephen Espinoza very recently reacted to Eddie Hearn's comments in reference to Gervonta Davis not being the most eloquent, the most articulate pugilist out there, saying, disgusting.
What is?
Sometimes the veneer wears off and people say what they actually think. In this case, repeating despicable racial tropes of black fighters as unintelligent and unthinking. I know Gervonta and I know Mike, and they're deep thinkers.
Eddie didn't make any mention of all that stuff you're bringing up.
Stephen Espinoza's really living up to his reputation for being a weasel, injecting these kinds of issues where they don't belong on the premise that Eddie doesn't think Gervonta Davis is articulate. A lot of people don't think Gervonta Davis is articulate.
I don't.
It's not a civil rights issue, and it's a free country. If Eddie Hearn doesn't think that Gervonta Davis is articulate, that's not the bat signal to go call Jesse.
Are you really championing a cause when you're deliberately flying false flags in the hopes that someone's will salute them?
Because if you're doing anything, you're doing that. It's not Eddie Hearn making generalizations. He's talking about one guy, just one guy.
And you're the one making generalizations, superimposing those comments to apply to other fighters that he's not actually talking about, other groups that he's not talking to.
As you can imagine, a lot of people on social media reacted to this, and they gave Stephen a piece of their mind, at which point he stated, I never called him a racist. I said he's repeating a racial trope.
What's the difference?
The implication is the same. You know what you're insinuating, you know what you're doing, and you know what you mean. And so does everybody else.
You're a flim-flam artist.
I said he's repeating a racial trope, that of the unintelligent, unthinking black athlete. I never said anything about his intent.
Eddie never said anything about unintelligent, unthinking black athletes.
His comments were in reference to one athlete in particular. Just one, not a group.
You're the one that superimposed it to a group, superimposed it to an entire demographic, where he was just talking about one guy who really isn't articulate.
Stephen Espinoza had the audacity to say that sometimes the veneer wears off and people say what they really think.
You're absolutely right, because I'm about to.
You're the despicable one. You're not championing a cause by flying these false flags. You're just struggling to keep up with your competitor, so the most that you can hope to do is assassinate his character in the hope that that manifests in his profession.
In the hopes that it affects public perception of this individual who just so happens to be your professional rival, your competitor.
Your numbers are down and you're getting left in the dust. Streaming platforms are the wave of the future, whereas your platform is a remnant of the past. Americans across the country are cutting the cord and you're feeling the pinch.
You're struggling to compete. That's what this is all about.
The problem with misappropriating an actual issue, the way that Stephen Espinoza is doing so, is you desensitize people to it by misappropriating it.
When you take it upon yourself to accuse Eddie Hearn of being bigoted or prejudiced on the premise that he said Gervonta Davis isn't articulate,
no matter how you try to dress it up, try to disguise it, saying you never called him a racist, but he's using racial tropes. He made no mention of race. He mentioned Gervonta Davis.
Him specifically, and he is one person. He's not the ambassador of any delegation.
As if to say that every member of a certain demographic sounds like Gervonta Davis, acts like Gervonta Davis. It's you that are making the generalizations, Stephen, not Eddie.
You know why you're doing it.
And what are the implications if there is a proliferation of these accusations? It could very well affect how a person is perceived, and that could manifest in a professional environment. Because you're flying these false flags and making these accusations.
That's why he's so careful to say he never called him a racist. Because if he did, he might get sued for slander.
And libel, though he ought to be. It's not dissimilar from what you see here in the YouTube boxing community whenever somebody says something derogatory about Al Heyman and Joe Blow wants to make it a civil rights issue. I'm sorry.
It's not a requisite that you either like Al Heyman, his PBC, or the matchmaking of that particular promotional outfit.
It's a product, and you're not obligated to like it.
And you can't guilt people into liking it by making these kinds of accusations.
Criticisms levied against Al Heyman, Stephen Espinoza, Showtime, and the PBC directly address their matchmaking, their quality control, or the lack thereof, the proliferation of box office fights that aren't box office worthy,
their propaganda,
and their slander. like what we're seeing here, in the hopes that they can get people to tune out what's actually being said by eliciting an emotional response. An emotional response, render the people belligerent by playing on certain tropes in the hopes that they won't actually listen, they won't actually pay attention to what exactly is being said, and is it true? Thankfully, not everybody out there is sheep. Not everybody out there goes for this stuff. Just a small substrata of individuals. Minute number with the intelligence quotient of a boiled egg. And it's not gonna work, Stefan. Highlighting that Gervonta Davis is not the most eloquent speaker, not the most articulate.
Probably isn't the deepest of thinkers based on things that he said, things that he's actually done.
You're telling me that if somebody thinks that he's a bozo, that he's stupid,
The only explanation is that they're a bigot.
so what if they think you're stupid?
What then?
Tack on Tom Brown. He's an idiot too. What then?
And don't forget Shelley Finkel, who managed to make Deontay Wilder reject more money for less money, only to get battered by Tyson Fury.
He's an idiot too. You got all these guys, different ages, different races, different demographics, with one common denominator. They're all bozos.
Idiots.
Imbeciles. Now what flag are you gonna fly now?
Give it a rest, Sally Struthers.
You're not fooling anybody. And just in keeping with the theme of con men and grifters, flim-flam artists, Mike Kopinger tweeted, Spence will have 60 days from the fight, Mendoza said, Gilberto Mendoza, to close a deal for a long-awaited, undisputed welterweight championship bout with Terence Crawford. If not, Spence must defend his 147-pound title against the winner of Virgil Ortiz versus Eimantas Stanionis. And bear in mind that he has another mandatory in the queue in Jaron Boots Ennis. He's the mandatory by way of the IBF, while he satisfies his WBC mandatory at welterweight up there at junior middleweight.
Except there's no titles on the line.
There are a lot of narratives floating around as to why that is, that Errol Spence Jr., he never wanted to fight Keith Thurman. He never wanted to give him a title shot, and technically, he isn't. And that's why the fight is at 154 pounds.
That's cute.
It's what the Spence fans it's what the Spence fans are going with, where what I see is two guys who the night of the fight will not have fought for about a year's time. A year, you know. Keith Thurman's last fight was way back there in February of last year, and Errol's last fight, wasn't that in April?
The unification match with Yordanis Ugas. That was in April of last year. So by the time that April of this year gets here, it will have been a year's time since he fought.
Two guys in their 30s. They don't fight that much. They're not very active. And you think they're fighting at 154 pounds for any reason other than the both of them jointly would struggle to make 147.
What are you, stupid or something?
Errol Spence Jr. has been cutting down to welterweight for a very long time, and Keith Thurman is the only other welterweight more inactive than Errol is. Making 147 pounds for the both of these guys would be very difficult. Moreover,
Errol don't care about the Terence Crawford fight. They were never serious about making it. If this fight is at 154 pounds, it's because it heralds his 154-pound campaign. He's not coming back down.
I'd love to be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I think that Errol Spence Jr., should he beat Keith Thurman, will campaign as a junior middleweight moving forward. And all this stuff about a 90-day grace period to negotiate, it's just a smokescreen.
If you really cared about fighting Terence Crawford, you'd be fighting him in April, not Keith.
Take notice of all the consideration that he's getting from the sanctioning bodies, the alphabet organizations. The WBC, in so many words, is allowing him to hold on to the title while he blows the weight.
That's basically what he's doing, and they're giving him a pass to do it.
You're the WBC. You order a fight between this guy and Keith Thurman.
And what they tell you is, we don't want to do it at 147, we want to do it at 154.
Well, if you're doing it at 154, then how the fuck is it a title shot? Then what's the point in ordering the fight? If you walked in there an ounce or 2 ounces above the welterweight limit, aren't they supposed to strip you?
You ordered Errol Spence Jr. to give Keith Thurman a title shot. Now Keith is fighting Errol for no title at all.
I'm supposed to buy this cockamamie cover story that Errol's gonna come back down to welterweight beyond the Keith Thurman fight to settle up with Terence Crawford. If he wanted to settle up with Terence Crawford, he wouldn't be fighting Keith Thurman, much less in the junior middleweight division. I've been telling you guys for years this was gonna happen.
And all the consideration that he's getting for this Keith Thurman fight from the sanctioning bodies, the alphabets, they'd give him that same consideration if he wanted to fight Terence Crawford. But he doesn't want to fight Terence Crawford, and that's not what Al Heyman wants either.
It's not what he wants for him. He wants to keep him unbeaten. He wants to keep him protected in winnable fights.
Maybe they put up a smokescreen. Maybe they pretend they're going to re-enter negotiations with Terence Crawford just for them to fall apart again. They'll wrap it around his neck and blame him for it and proceed to campaign in the junior middleweight division.
Maybe they do that. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just say, fuck it. If you want to fight Errol, you've got to move up. And if you fight him, it won't be for undisputed.
Based on all the consideration that Errol's getting from the WBC, why should any other WBC champion kill themselves making weight? Should they not be given the same consideration that he's getting?
You ordered a welterweight contest, and what this is a junior middleweight fight. You ordered a welterweight title fight, and this is a junior middleweight for no title at all. How does that satisfy the mandatory?
So he doesn't have to make weight or nothing.
This ain't brazen chicanery.
All right.
Okay, whatever you say, but I told you, there ain't gonna be no undisputed.
How long have I been saying that?
You wanna believe this cockamamie story? You go right ahead.
Believe whatever you like.
Men's heavyweight news. Deontay Wilder's trainer, Malik Scotch, has said their next fight is likely Andy Ruiz in March or April, though a mystery opponent is also in play. Ruiz is mandated, but Deontay is big time. When there's another bigger fighter, step aside happens. Sometimes.
Who could they get for Deontay Wilder that would be a bigger fight for him than Andy Ruiz? Not that the Ruiz fight is a mega fight.
It'd be bigger than Wilder's last fight. The fight with Robert Helenius, it would be bigger than Andy Ruiz's last fight with Luis Ortiz. Together, they can make a bigger fight than their last outings, than their last fights, but it's not going to be on the same scale, same size as a Joshua versus Usyk or a Usyk versus Fury.
Those fights.
But what mystery opponent could Malik Scotch be referring to? Somebody on the PBC side of things. Who on the PBC?
Who on that side of things makes for a bigger fight than an Andy Ruiz fight?
To where they would skip out on him and fight somebody else. Who on the PBC side of things could Malik Scotch be referring to? Ali Demirezin? Adam Kovnowski? Those are not bigger fights than a Ruiz fight.
Frankie Sanchez?
It's not a bigger fight either. Nobody knows the man.
Nobody wants to.
Hell, Frankie Sanchez, unbeaten Frankie Sanchez, would be a high-risk, low-reward opponent for Deontay Wilder, in spite of being on the same side of things as Deontay Wilder. I kind of get the sense that maybe he's talking about somebody else's fighter, some fighter that fights under a different banner, on a different platform. I vaguely recall Shelley Finkel some weeks ago expressing an interest in doing a Wilder versus Daniel Dubois fight.
Some months. We talked about it here on the channel.
Shelley must have been licking his chops watching that Kevin Lorena fight. Kevin Lorena, a cruiserweight who moved up to heavyweight. He certainly doesn't have the reputation for being a puncher that Deontay Wilder has. Could that be who they're talking about?
Maybe.
It's down to the mystery opponent and Andy Ruiz Jr. Since AJ had made up his mind and does not want to fight Deontay right now, we're down to Andy Ruiz and the mystery guy. The mystery fighter is not as guaranteed to happen as the Ruiz fight. If you're looking at it from the business perspective, it's most likely going to be the mandatory shot with Ruiz. Scotch told Best Sports Betting Canada. It's looking like Ruiz, but in this game there's no telling, as Deontay is big-time boxing. When you're big-time boxing, and as sad or as unfortunate as it may sound to some people, mandatories don't mean nothing. Fighters have stepped aside to make big fights happen, but to what big fight is he referring to? Aside from Andy Ruiz, there are no other big fights on the PBC side of things. Now, if you broaden your horizons...
Could Wilder versus Dubois in the UK do better business than Wilder versus Ruiz in the US?
That's assuming that Deontay Wilder would travel to the United Kingdom. If he did, I think he could do very good business with a fight like that. But if you bring Daniel Dubois here, I'm not that sure he has...
He's not Ricky Hatton, you know. I'm not sure people are going to travel to see him get sparked out at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas.
Might be a bit of an overestimation to think that you're going to get the same reaction for Daniel Dubois that you perhaps got for Tyson Fury, or the reaction that you would get for someone else. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because who says it's Daniel Dubois?
It's a mystery, all right.
This goes on in boxing. It's what the fans want or what makes business sense for the fighters and their team. It's likely to be Ruiz, but if not, there are other negotiations going on as well.
You think it could be Dillian White?
Wilder versus White. in the United Kingdom or the United States might be a bigger fight, I'd say, than Wilder versus Dubois. Maybe even bigger than Wilder versus Ruiz.
Maybe.
I don't really want to attach a particular location to such a fight because if Wilder were fighting somebody like Dillian Whyte, that opens a lot of different doors. That's a fight that you could do in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Abu Dhabi.
Eddie Hearn has stated very recently that the lines of communication between Matchroom and Team Wilder are open and they're positive conversations, positive lines of communication. So could this mystery opponent be a Matchroom fighter?
If it were, I think that would really throw people for a loop, and it would serve as an encouraging omen that the Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder fight might actually materialize, might actually happen, and this fight, whoever it's against, is simply a prelude, but a good sign.
We could be going in March or early April, but it really depends. The only thing I can say at the moment is Ruiz is mandated, but Deontay is big-time boxing.
The estimated pay-per-view buys for Deontay Wilder's last fight weren't big-time, and because of that, and the scarcity of big-time options on the PBC side of things,
Really just one.
75 to 77,000 pay-per-views sold opposite the ring, Robert Hellenius. I really don't imagine in this landscape, in this economy, that they put up astronomical numbers with a Wilder versus Ruiz fight. I think it could definitely do better than the Hellenius fight did, but how much better?
Malik Scott keeps saying it, Wilder's big-time boxing, but he didn't put up big-time numbers his last time out.
Numbers the last time out were a far cry from the numbers that he put up opposite the ring, Tyson Fury. Given his age, where he is in his career, and what options are available to him on his side of things, that may leave him so inclined, him and his team, to broaden their horizons. Keep an open mind.
Don't limit yourself to just what PBC has to offer, because they ain't got that much anyway.
And when you have a big-time boxer like Deontay and a mandatory going on at the same time, and there's another bigger fighter, step aside happens sometimes. You never know. Business is willing to be made to make bigger fights happen.
Whoever this mystery fighter is, at least in Malik Scott's mind, the fight with him sounds like it's a bigger fight than a fight with Andy Ruiz, but who could he be talking about?
It's obviously not Tyson Fury. Why would they want to fight him again? It's obviously not Alexander Usyk because he's supposed to be fighting Tyson Fury, and it's not Anthony Joshua.
So who could it be? Who makes for a bigger fight than a Ruiz fight?
You know, Wilder's pushing 40. 2 consecutive losses to Tyson Fury, he just rebounded, and if he's sticking around, it's for the big prices. Who can provide Deontay Wilder a really big purse not named Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, or Anthony Joshua? Who can do it?
Because whoever it is, Malik Scott seems to think that fight is a bigger fight than a Ruiz fight.
It's only so many guys it could be. He could do good business with a Joe Joyce fight in the United Kingdom or the United States, but Joe Joyce is a bit of a high-risk opponent for Deontay Wilder at this stage. Now, Daniel Dubois, not as high a risk, but not as high a reward.
Beatable, though. Definitely beatable.
And again, so is Dillian Whyte, with more of a profile than a Joe Joyce or a Daniel Dubois.
Been in box office fights several times in the United Kingdom and at least once in the United States. The Tyson Fury fight from last year.
It was a box office fight transatlantically. It was a box office fight here in the United States. I don't think it did great numbers in the United States, but it was a pay-per-view.
It's going to be interesting to see who it is that Deontay Wilder ends up fighting in either March or April.